they include, the candidates include, as I say, reverse alphabetical order, Brad Witt, Dan Streit, Dominic Hammond, Jim Greenfield, Brad Avakian, and Saba Ahmed. So, the procedure for the evening. We'd appreciate it if our speakers identify themselves at the beginning of each statement in order to identify you to those who will be listening by radio in a subsequent broadcast. It is being taped by KMUN for subsequent broadcast. We've asked each of our candidates to make a 3-minute opening statement. Responses to questions should be 2 minutes long, or up to 2 minutes, and there'll be 3-minute closing statements. The questions will be written only, and to this end, we have cards and pencils and paper available for you. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and someone from our group, AUW, will come and collect the card to be then presented to our questioners over here. Let's see. You may identify which speaker you want the question to go to if there's a special individual you want it to go to. We have a timer to stick to our schedule. When the speaker has 30 seconds left, the timer will raise a yellow paper, and when the speaker's time has elapsed, the timer will raise a red paper. Speaking of timers, we request that everyone turn their cell phones off. And a reminder, we have some voter registration actual forms that you can use to register to vote. I understand that one needs to register before Tuesday to be voting. So the first table to the left as you go out of the door, there's some literature if you have any questions, plus the actual forms to fill out. Well, we'll conclude our forum around 8:45. And I guess we're off. And why don't we just start in the reverse alphabetical order? So, Brad Witt.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to present my candidacy for Oregon's 1st Congressional District. I'm State Representative Brad Witt, a 4-term state legislator, and I'm running for Congress because it's time that Oregon's working families have a representative in Washington, someone who will stand up for them, someone who understands what it's like to be from a working family, and someone who has also worked hard to achieve the American dream. I am that representative. I am running for Congress because Oregonians need an advocate who has fresh and innovative ideas, someone who has worked in Washington, someone who knows how to get the job done. I am that person. I'm running for Congress because Oregonians need a proven leader with a strong economic background and a leader who can find solutions to complex problems. My 30-plus years as a negotiator have taught me what it takes to bring opposing sides together to the table and to find the best solution possible. I am that leader. As a state representative for Oregon's House District 31, I have sponsored and supported legislation to bring jobs to my district, adequately fund education, provide additional support for the Oregon Food Bank, and prevent violence against women and children. I support a woman's right to choose and believe that all Americans have the right to marry the person whom they love. I'm a proud Democrat, I am a proud union member, and I would be proud to represent you as your next congressman. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Streit.
Does this work standing up?
It should. Well, standing up, I'm not sure.
Does it come out of its own?
Why don't you try it and see if the audience can hear you? Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me okay?
No, you're not doing that.
Ah.
I'm going to make a note here that mics that are in front of the candidates are exclusively for our recording. They are not attached to the PA system, so candidates, in order to reach the people who are here tonight, you'll have to speak up.
Now can you hear me?
No.
You can hear me. Why don't I try that? My name is Dan Strike. I was born and raised in Oregon. Currently, and have for the last 35 years, lived in Clatsop County. In fact, I'm the only candidate that's filed in Clatsop County. And I did this for a reason. Our federal government is broken, doesn't work, it needs to be fixed. I have some wonderful, forthright ideas to make it work. Maybe a little different, maybe a little even radical. My platform is short and concise. Number one, you get out of the war business. If you take a quick look, Oregon has spent close to $12 billion, that's with a B, since the wars have been going on. That's a lot of education and health care, etc., that didn't happen. And the second item is governed by consensus or compromise. So that's my take. I have spent the last 10 years talking to a lot of people, and everyone, without exception, except for the federal government, will agree with you and me what's wrong with the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Doesn't work. You've got 7 tribes in Afghanistan, another 40 sub-tribes that don't get along with each other, that never have got along with each other. Why in the world are we trying to correct, in our perception, what goes on in other countries? We don't have that right. We should have never gone to war there. And unfortunately, all these wonderful social services that you want, that I'd like to see, I don't care whether it's education, health care, fishing, timber, aren't going to happen. Trust me, folks, they're not going to happen. Not going to happen as long as you stay at war, because all your resources are going to that war. Not going to happen. Unless you decide to make a difference, which will take a little effort on your part. I'm not going to be able to do it. But with your help, we can make a difference. Thank you.
Dominic Hammond?
Hi, I'm Dominic Hammond. I'm an average Oregonian like you that doesn't think Washington's working for them. I don't have a speechwriter, I don't have a campaign manager, and I don't have a poster. I will only be working for you. The 3 main issues I'll be working on: jobs, taxes, and getting property rights back. For jobs, I will support a stimulus package that focuses on rebuilding our infrastructure for business, improving schools. All schools should look like this. This is beautiful. And giving new money for small businesses to start up and expand, because that's where the jobs are really created in America. For tax relief, I will introduce my fair share percentage tax plan. Unlike the Bush tax plan, that the average Oregonian family of 4 is put $168,000 in debt, my plan will balance the budget and make everybody pay their fair share, like George Washington did when he was president, after he was president, because he was one of the largest producers of whiskey. As for your property rights, I will initiate impeachment proceedings for Roberts, Alito, Thomas, and Scalia. Their Citizens United decision has really hurt our country by selling out to corporations, and it didn't hold up the good behavior clause and the law and equity portion of the Constitution. They need to be impeached because they will not overturn themselves. They do not compromise. Republicans always claim they know the Constitution. Then they need to read it. It starts out, we the people, not I the individual or the corporations have a right to. Also, they need to read the Declaration of Independence. The last section of the last sentence says, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That is something that we all have to live up to, especially now in this recession that we're going through. We need to get out of it, and we need to pledge our fortunes to get out of it. I myself have went to the Tea Parties, rallies, and seen what they're saying. I have stood up and asked them questions that they have not been able to answer. I stood up to them there, and I was standing up to them in Washington. They are trying to dismantle Social Security and Medicare. I will not allow that to happen. I will stand up and fight for every person, because every person goes every morning and goes to work for someone else. And a lot of those jobs don't pay the income for those people to retire on. They need it for their livelihood when they're in retirement, something all of us will do. Thank you very much.
Jim Greenfield?
I'm Jim Greenfield. I am the fiscally conservative candidate for the Republican nomination. Can I ask how many people in this room are registered Republican? A few, okay. For the rest of you, I don't expect to persuade you that everything you believe in is wrong in the next 3 minutes. I was at, but I will ask some questions and maybe plant some seeds of doubt. I was at a function the other night where only the Democrats here were on the podium. I was not. And I sat there and listened for 2 hours, and I didn't hear one of them mention once the national debt, which seemed to me like the proverbial elephant in the room that nobody talked about. Didn't mention the national debt. And I think the reason they didn't mention the national debt is because they don't have a clue how to deal with it. Now, you probably all heard that we have a $15 trillion national debt, right? How many of you have heard that? It's almost $15 trillion. It's going up by $4 billion a day, so if it's not $15 trillion yet, it will be in a few weeks. Now, how many of you have also heard about the unfunded liabilities? How many have heard about that? It's another $70 trillion in unfunded liabilities, which they conveniently don't put on the books. This is obligations the United States government has to pay Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So if you add that up, you got about $85 trillion. How many think the United States government has the ability to pay that back? Okay, let's do the math. This is not conservative or liberal, it's math. The government takes in about $2.5 trillion a year in revenue, round numbers, spends close to $4 trillion a year. So that would be equivalent, in round numbers, I kind of did this in my head on the way here. Suppose you've got somebody who makes $50,000 a year, average wage earner, and spends $85,000 a year, and by living this way, he has accumulated $1.5 million in debt. What would you say about such a person? He's bankrupt. He doesn't have a prayer at paying it back. Now, if somebody in that situation, a friend of yours, came to you and said, boy, I'm really in deep trouble. I'm spending $85,000, I'm making $50,000, I got $1.5 million in debt. What should I do? What does that yellow sheet mean?
30 seconds.
You say, if they say to you, what should I do? What's your advice? How many of you would say, spend more money, borrow more money? Anybody would give that advice? That's what the advice our president is giving. He wants to spend more money and borrow more money. And how many of you think we can tax our way out of this? Few. Well, I don't have time to explain to you why mathematically that is impossible. It's not going to happen. We'll talk about that later. Jim Greenfield for Congress.com, Republican primary. Thank you.
Brad Avakian.
Thank you. I'm Brad Avakian, and like you, I'm not someone who likes spinning his wheels. When it comes to the issues that affect Northwest Oregon, I take action with conviction, and I get the job done. And right now what Northwest Oregon needs is someone that can go to Congress and get the job done, putting our people back to work. And that begins with my plan for a 21st century WPA program. You know, we've got 30 million people in this country that aren't working enough hours to make ends meet for their families. I say let's get to work rebuilding our bridges and our roads, retrofitting our buildings with green technologies, and let's start with a new smart electrical grid that can accommodate the emerging renewable energy industry. And I'm also going to get the job done for you protecting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the social safety net. You know, it wasn't that long ago, I met a woman on a Northwest Oregon doorstep. I walked up her pathway to her house. She had 2 kids playing in the front yard, tattered shorts, shaved heads, distended bellies, the kind of thing you'd see in a third world country, but not Northwest Oregon. And I talked to her at her doorstep about education and about the economy, and I could see right away that's just not where she was at. And so we talked about her kids, and we talked about her family. And pretty soon I said goodbye and started to walk back down the path, and she said, you know what I really need? And I turned around and she said, something to eat. Right here in Northwest Oregon. I went straight back to the office, I called the Oregon Food Bank and made sure that at least that family was taken care of. But I'm going back to Congress to fight for people like her and to fight for people like you and protect that social safety net. I'll also take action on progressive principles. I say bring the troops home right now, without delay. I say repeal the No Child Left Behind Act immediately. It's pitting school against school. And let's make sure every school succeeds equally. And stop those Tea Party Republicans in Congress that are doing everything they can to roll back the clock on women. I spent my career as a civil rights lawyer right here in Northwest Oregon standing up for people that had suffered injustice. Matter of fact, Debbie and I both grew up here. We raised our children here. And while representing you in the State House and the State Senate, I took action on progressive ideas like passing the Oregon Renewable Energy Act, which has made us a leader in green jobs, the first expansion of Oregon's bottle bill in 4 decades. I helped protect consumers by kicking those payday lenders out of the state of Oregon, helped protect our coast and our rivers from invasive species by going after foreign ships that were dumping their ballast water here. From the small things to the big, I've always rolled up my sleeves for you, and that's what I'll do for you in Congress.
Okay, I'm going to hand this over to Donna and Rosalie. As you can see, we're handing out some more index cards if you wish. We ask in the interest of having our candidates have maximum time that there not be applause during the question and answer and also the closing arguments. They're great speechifiers, and it sounds like they can fire us up a bit. But if I could ask you to hang in there. So anyway.
I'm going to applause.
All right, gentlemen, we'll start with Dominic Hannon. We'll just go right down the line, and each of you will provide an answer, please. What are your thoughts regarding the nationwide spread of the Occupy Wall Street movement? Will it spread, and will it be effective, and do you support it?
Dominic Hammond, yes, I do support it. It's about people realizing what went wrong under the prior administration. They were looking out for themselves. They weren't looking out for our country. It should spread to all places because all the people need good paying jobs. Listening to the conservative radio talk show today on the way here, 40%, they keep complaining, 40% of Americans don't pay taxes. That's how low of an income Americans are making. They will never be able to buy cars. They'll never be able to buy houses. They won't be able to fund themselves to go to school. This Occupy Wall Street affects everybody, and they should be expanding it, and we should be paying attention. And it's something I do support, because when 40% of America has to be on food stamps, and then they work, that is terrible for the world's richest country. The next child born here in America owes $42,000. What a lousy way to come in the richest country in the world. Also, Wall Street has to pay their fair share. They got away with getting away with what they did and got bailed out by us. That has to end. We need our money back, and that's something I will fight for in Congress.
Brad Avakian, I was down there last Thursday when the protesters came to downtown Portland to do Occupy Wall Street in Portland here. And I have to tell you, I fully support them, and I fully support the folks in New York that have been out there protesting as long as they have. You know, people are ticked off. And I gotta tell you, I'm ticked off too. We've got nearly 200,000 people that are not working in Oregon right now. And you look at Congress, and you see people sitting on their hands, not doing anything to help out the average family. They're allowing Wall Street corporations to continue hiding their money in offshore accounts and not paying their fair share of the taxes. See the top 2% in this country not paying their fair share. Some of them are getting a lower tax rate than the people that work for them. And you see corporations getting loopholes like a jet or other luxuries and not paying their fair share of the taxes. And you got people right here that are worried about where their next paycheck is going to come from and how they're going to feed their family next week. Well, this country was born out of protests. People see an injustice. They see a system that isn't fair to middle-class families and working people. And I say, you bet, take to the streets and show the world how you feel. And that's why I was down there with them last Thursday.
Jim Greenfield. It's not surprising that we start to get social turmoil when we have an economy that's been depressed for 4 years. You know, the average recession lasts 6 to 12 months. This one's been going on for 4 years. This is more like a depression. If you add together the number of officials, the number of unemployed, which is 9.1%, it's higher in Oregon, to the 7% who have given up looking, we have 16-17% unemployment in this country, which is comparable to the Great Depression. And yes, as long as we have economic decline, this kind of unrest will continue to grow. And it could get a lot worse. It could get as ugly as it is in Greece, where they have rioting. That's where we'll go if we keep following the economic policies that are producing this depressed economy. I'll give you a couple of numbers that pretty much, for me, sum up the story. Today, we have 19 million Americans employed by government, 11 million employed in manufacturing. Now, you go back 20 or 30 years, those numbers were reversed. We had 25 million in manufacturing and 12 million in government. What's happening here? The private sector is shrinking. Why? Because the public sector is growing. It's a zero-sum game. And as the public sector raises taxes, increases regulations on business, gets bigger, creates more bureaucracy, the private sector has to shrink. It's math. Again, 25% of GDP now goes to the government. Now, let me ask you a question. Suppose you took 11 million people who are now employed by the government and you moved them over into manufacturing, so that number went up from 11 million to 22 million. The number in government went from 19 million down to 8 million. What do you think would be the effect on the economy? What does the government produce? They don't build the houses, they don't grow the food, they don't make the clothes, they don't make the telephones and the videos and the televisions. They don't produce all the wealth that we all enjoy. The manufacturing sector does. You keep growing the government, you're going to kill the manufacturing, what's left of the manufacturing sector, and then all the jobs are going to be going to China, and you can say, well, why did they leave? Why did those businesses leave?
In answer to the first question, why the Occupy picked the city across the nation? It's because it's a response to the complete and utter frustration that the middle class has with its own decline. And take a look at what's going on around us. Long-term under and unemployed, and in my legislative district, Clatsop and Columbia counties, on average, for the past couple of years, on a good day, 1 out of every 5 people is either under or unemployed. And in the middle of the winter, for the last 2 winters, 1 out of every 25. It's made it impossible for folks to be able to make their family budgets And as part of that, people are finding it virtually impossible to meet the family mortgage. 3 million mortgage foreclosures across this country to date. Probably 3 times that many by the next couple of years. And certainly last but not least, we're faced with the most unequal income distribution this country has seen since the eve of the Great Depression. In the past 30 years, the top 1%, the wealthiest folks in our country, have received more additional income than the bottom 90%. Folks, this cannot sustain our nation. And that's why these folks are out there. And that's why a week ago tonight, I was at Occupy Portland when their General Assembly decided not to leave. Why? Because they were out there telling our story, America's story, the plight of the middle class's story. And the last question, will this spread like a prairie fire? Because we have so many folks in America who are faced with these problems right now.
That was a great question, by the way. That's the question on everybody's mind. And last Friday, I went to Seaside for their walk to the banks, to City Hall, just to get the feel. I think everybody in this room, what a wonderful opportunity you've got, and I feel privileged to be here to be able to tell you how I feel and what my take is. The people that are sitting in are obviously frustrated and unhappy, but they're confused. They don't know what to do. They're willing to sit in, and make noise. That's not the answer. Here's the answer. Congress is full of greed, has no morals. Can we agree on that? Okay. Here's a 3-year-old sitting here holding their toys, not going to share. You can't have it, I'm going to throw an apple or something at you. So, how are you going to legislate moral and greed? You have the power to do this. I don't. You recall them. You're in Texas, you recall them all. You go, sir. You're the answer. I'm not the answer. This isn't the answer. But you're the answer. You recall everybody. You get people in there that care about this country. Not going to happen otherwise. Not going to happen. That thing is going to continue to grow, and there will be riots. It may not happen this year, but it might happen next year. And you have to make that change. You have to get out of the war business, and you have to replace what's going on that's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, I'm sorry, before I state the next question, gentlemen, would you all please remember every time you stand up to say your first and last names, please. This question will start with Bradavakian. Some Americans are at the depths of despair and disgust at the conduct of Congress. And I think much of that stems from our sadly corrupt election system and campaigning, which seem to have totally undermined the democratic process. Britain and Canada do not have to suffer through a year and a half of multi-million-dollar campaigns. Are you satisfied with our election system? If not, what would you do to change it?
Thank you. I'm Bradavakian. Washington is broken. I think your question gets right at the reason why. The folks in Congress right now, after the November elections, never flipped the light switch off on the campaigns and then turned their attention to relationship building and governing again. The campaigns just keep churning their way through the legislative process with representatives looking to the lobbyists for where their next campaign check is going to come from, and how they can set up the other guy in the next elections. We're not going to get good policy in this country until we have serious campaign finance reform. So that starts with overturning Citizens United. Corporations do not have the same constitutional rights as real people do, and the Supreme Court got it wrong. The second thing is that even under Citizens United, I think we can limit the amount that candidates can spend in a race, which will in some ways deter the amount that goes into the campaign. And here's the other thing that I think would be terrific. This has been an unusual experience in a special election like this, because you don't have all this time to build up a campaign. It's like 3 or 4 months long. I'd love to see Congress say, all right, from now on, every campaign is going to be 4 months long, and forget about this 2-year run-up to every federal election. So we've got to tighten up our system, have good campaign finance reform, and then get Congress putting its attention back on good policy making for people in their communities, as opposed to being more worried about the next election.
Jim Greenfield, Republican primary. You know, the election system we have is set up by the Constitution, and I'm not that eager to start tinkering with it without compelling reason. Yes, I think there is a culture of corruption in Washington, D.C., and I think we can understand the reason for that from the old adage that I'm sure you've all heard, that power corrupts. The government has become so powerful that it's inevitable that corruption becomes part of the process. For example, why do you think all of these special interests give billions of dollars to political candidates? Do you think it's altruism? No, they're getting something back. How many of you think that the TARP bailout of the banks in 2008, $867 billion of taxpayer money given to a bunch of failed banks, banks that were underwater because of their own mismanagement? How many of you, I know I've loaded the question, but how many of you think that was a good idea? Anybody? Okay. See, they've given another $800 billion to these banks and AIG insurance companies since then. These were companies that were completely mismanaged. Why did they get that money? Oh, well, the government said, now this was under a Republican. I'm a Republican, right? It was under a
On illegal immigration.
Jim Greenfield. Yeah, I think President Obama has, I'll give him his due. He's come up with a very effective way of dealing with the problem of illegal immigration. He's made the American economy so bad that nobody even wants to come here anymore. Now that sounds like a joke, but it's not entirely untrue, is it? In fact, to give you an idea how bad it was, last week 17 Americans were arrested trying to cross into Mexico illegally to find jobs. That part is a joke. I saw a lot of puzzle clubs. The way to deal with illegal immigration is you have to stop it in the future. I'm totally opposed to the idea of trying to round up people who are here illegally and deport them. That destroys families, it's extremely inhumane, and it's not possible anyway. But we can do something to prevent illegals from coming here, people coming here illegally in the future. We need to seal off the border. And not just for illegals, but I mean, think about all the drug running, the human trafficking, terrorists can be coming across that border. We need to know who's coming into the country. But we can also do something else. Now, right now, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to talk about it because our economy is so bad that this isn't really an issue. But when the economy starts growing again, which hopefully it'll do when we have a change in administration, we could start having more intelligent policies to encourage people to come here legally, to fill the jobs that need to be filled, to bring people with the right education, the right kind of training, for people who have capital to invest, encourage them to come to America, because we need immigrants to build our economy in the future, just as we always have in the past. And it'll also help with the Social Security and Medicare crisis, to have young people coming in from abroad who become taxpayers and help support those systems. So we need more legal immigration. First, we got to fix our economy.
Brad Witt. We are, after all, a nation of immigrants. And immigration and the diversity and the strengths and the talents that every immigrant group that has brought to this country in successive waves has made our country stronger and greater. And that is the source of our national strength. My father's family, the Witts, came to this country in 1638. My mother's family didn't make it until right before World War I. But the important thing is that my grandfather, who came from Poland, after he served in World War I, became a full-fledged American. And the point is that we need to find a pathway in this country so that the immigrants who are participants in our communities, who pay taxes in our communities, who are part of our social infrastructure in our communities, and otherwise are an American except for that citizenship. They too need that pathway. And I think that it would be most important to use my grandfather's experience as an example. That if you serve in the military or you make it through a couple years of college, you're here and you have a clean law record, that you're participating in our society, that you ought to have earned a pathway to citizenship, and that you too ought to become an American citizen so that you too can help make America great. We are a nation of immigrants, and we need to make room for all of us.
Dan Strike from Clatsop County, and I'll try not to throw any bombs at you. I don't totally understand the immigration law as it currently is on the books. I would need to know more about that, but certainly we should live within those laws till they're changed. I do have issue with illegal immigrants who are in our jails and prisons at our expense. They're not in this country legally. They're felons or worse. I would immediately send them home, whether it's Venezuela or China or Mexico or wherever they came from. We have enough burdens in this country. We don't need to be taking care of the prisoners from other countries that come here and do things illegally. So that's a must. I'm not sure how the school issue would work. In other words, you're here illegally, now you're getting education and you're getting health care at the citizenry expense. I'm not sure that's quite right. That needs to be looked at as far as I'm concerned. I'm not so sure they should be getting free education at everybody's expense. Certainly all the citizens should, but if they're here illegally, I'm not so sure that's right. And that would be one of those things that you would want to negotiate. But I think that there's room to work those out as a group, and I think you'll.
Dominic County. First, I'd like to address the Arizona paper thin law. If you paid $1 in federal taxes for our prison system, they're going to raise your taxes to $60. That's a 6,000% increase in your federal taxes for the prison system. You times that by the other 20 Republican states want to do it, the taxes are going up $1,200. I don't think anybody in this room would afford $1,200 more in federal taxes. Second, the people that are being smuggled into this country are paying between $5,000 and $6,000 from south of the border. People coming from Asia are paying upwards of $40,000 to get here. Instead of having them pay the smugglers, have them come to our border, register as workers, and pay $1,000 to come into this country as a worker. That way we can track them. We know what they're doing. We know who they are and where they are. Second, that $5,000 that they have, that is a great big increase to our economy. That's $5 to $6 billion that's added immediately to our economy every year. That's just from south of the border. Not sure what it's going to be coming from the east, but you're talking 40,000, maybe talking $40 billion a year coming to our country. That way our country and our economy can expand. They need housing, they need cars, they need insurance, they need food, they need clothes. That's how our economy expands. Putting people in jail because they're being smuggled into this country is a waste of our tax dollar. We need to help those people come to this country legally, help them find jobs, help them find housing, and most importantly, we need to make sure it's done legally so all of us can be secure in our country.
Brad Avakian. We need to fully fund our Border Patrol and our intelligence agencies in order to protect us from people that want to cross our borders and do us harm. But you know what? The vast majority of people that immigrate here are here because they want to work and contribute and take care of their families and put themselves in a better position in life than from the place they were at, where they couldn't do that. And it's not unlike a lot of the stories from everybody in this room, who all came from an immigrant family, unless you're one of our Native American friends. My family immigrated here from Armenia over 100 years ago and scratched out a life for themselves. And so for the folks that are here and contributing and working, let's find an efficient pathway to citizenship. And the other is this. For the children of immigrants that come here, let's give them the same access to higher education as all the other kids that went up through our high school system here and pass the DREAM Act immediately. And the last thing is this, and it really comes from a young woman who asked this question in Columbia County when we were all there the other night. And what she said as she was paraphrasing the question is, why can't we be a country with a heart again? And I just loved it. You know, somewhere along the line we decided we were going to be a country of divisiveness and exclusion when it came to welcoming people, to people that want to immigrate here. I want us to be a country that welcomes people into our society, a country of inclusion, not a country of exclusion. And as that young lady said, a country that's got a heart again.
This question will start with Brad Witt. Will you support legalizing same-sex marriage and the repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act?
Brad Witt. I most certainly will support same-sex marriage, and I will be happy to do so, and I will be happy and proud to fight for that, just like I did when I helped lead the floor fight on Oregon's House of Representatives for civil unions. And I believe, as I said in my opening statement, that everyone in America, not just here in Oregon, but everyone in America should have the opportunity and the right to marry whomever they love. Because the reality is love. It doesn't matter who's being loved, but only that there is love. The second question, would I be willing to get rid of the Defense of Marriage Act? And one word answer, absolutely.
Dan Strike, Clatsop County. I would vote no. And I will also say this, that I would like to, and this is a very sensitive, loving, caring subject, might not be negotiable, might not be a compromise. Principles might be so strong that you have to recall me, okay? But I hope that you all have your own feelings and you live by those. I think everybody here can tell right from wrong, good from bad. this is how I feel, and I try to live by that standard, and that's how I operate.
Dominic Hammond. First, I'd like to say, I do think people should be able to marry who they want. I think this is a religious question. You should not be told what to do in your church. If you want to get married to somebody that's of the same sex, that's up to you. Because it's your church, it's your life, and that's big government when they tell you that you can't marry who you want. Republicans constantly scream, government's too big, but yet they're going to step into somebody's church and tell them who they can marry. They're going to go into somebody's business and tell them who they get married in their business. That is flat out wrong. This is America, and you should have a right to marry who you like.
You know, the only reason I ever went to the law school at Lewis and Clark was because I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. I'm Brad Avaki. And stand up for people who were being treated unequally, who needed a voice and didn't have one, and who needed justice. I got to one of the most meaningful times in my time at the state legislature was carrying the employment non-discrimination bill across the Senate floor and handing it off to the governor for signature. And that was the bill that now precludes discrimination in Oregon based on sexual orientation. I can't wait to get to Congress for the people of Northwest Oregon and put in the bill that repeals DOMA, and then to put in the bill that provides equality for all people in this country, because I think that two consenting adults that want to get married ought to be able to, regardless of their gender or their sexual orientation.
Jim Greenfield, Republican primary. I don't remember why I went to law school, though I think it seemed like a good idea at the time. But I haven't practiced law for 30 years because I was too honest to practice law. As to legalizing same-sex marriage, I'm against it, and I would keep the Defense of Marriage Act. Since my answer was so short on that question, I'll take the rest of my time to distinguish myself from my opponent in the Republican primary who didn't show up tonight, Rob Cornelius. Rob is a nice guy, attractive candidate. He's a moderate. I'm a fiscal conservative. Rob is totally out of tune with most Republican voters. He's refused to take the pledge to repeal Obamacare. I know there are a lot of Democrats in this audience, but there were people listening to the radio also. Repealing Obamacare is a core issue for Republicans. Not a single Republican in Congress voted for Obamacare, and they all want to repeal it. If Rob Cornelius goes to Congress, he will be the only Republican supporting keeping Obamacare. Second, he has refused to take the pledge to repeal, take the No New Taxes pledge. And he has said on his website that he thinks if we have a balanced budget amendment, severe tax hikes will be necessary. I've taken both the pledge to repeal Obamacare and the pledge not to raise taxes. Again, these are core issues for Republicans. Unfortunately for you Democrats here, you can't vote for Rob Cornelius because he's running in the Republican primary. But for Republicans, I'm much more in tune with the views of the vast majority of Republicans on these crucial and other issues, core conservative issues. And again, it's Jim Greenfield for Congress.com if you want more information about this.
Our next question will start with Dan Strike, please. Do you have any proposals to reform our tax code? And if you say you support closing tax loopholes, do you include the home mortgage deduction in the loopholes category?
When you get asked a complex question, you're required to give a complex answer. I was at a forum last night, and it was in Taggart, and there was a tax attorney, an old guy, at least as old as I am. not too far from me, and he asked a question about what was wrong with the tax system. And I laid it on him because I don't have a clue, really. I know that the tax system is relatively new in the scheme of things. Didn't it start back in 1920 or something? So in the scheme of things, it's fairly new. And there's no question that we pay a lot more taxes than we should, but that's because of all the misspent money that we give, right? So here's an ideal opportunity for all of these tax attorneys and a few people off the street to get together and rewrite the entire system. And we're not looking at a 999 thing or anything like that, or a 666 thing. But wouldn't it be nice if it was a fair tax and people could sit down and negotiate and come up with a simple form? I don't know whether it needs to be a flat tax, but there's a lot of smart people that could come up with an answer far better than I could. Thank you.
Don McCammon. I do have a fair share percentage tax plan. It's based on how much you make, income tax and as businesses. If she was the largest business, and the person sitting in the back was the smallest business, if she made 5% of all the money everywhere, she paid 5% of the tax. The person in the back who made 0.01% will pay 0.01%. Right now, 2/3 of all corporations don't pay tax. There will be no loophole for them. There will be no tax deductions. Everybody will pay. Because we all need the infrastructure to do what we do. And that's what comes out. We need to pay for infrastructure, schools, Medicare, Social Security, all that. Right now, back in 1935, income tax paid $1, corporations pay $1. Right now, we pay $1, we pay $6, and corporations pay $1. Our taxes have gone up 600%. Corporations' taxes have gone down. We need to make this fair share for everybody. Fair share in our income tax, fair share in our corporate tax. There will be no deductions for airplanes, no deductions for suites at the basketball game. There will be no deductions because everybody is counting on somebody else to get up and go to work and do a job and make a profit. And because there's a profit to be made, taxes need to be paid.
Grativakian, the changes that we should make in the tax code are those that take the burden off of middle-class families and that put a greater share on the wealthy and on the corporations in the country. And so, sure, the people in the top 2% tax bracket need to start paying more, and corporations, especially Wall Street corporations, foreign corporations that are hiding money offshore, not paying their fair share of the taxes, that have the kind of loopholes like luxury items, like jets, those need to go. But as far as the home mortgage deduction goes, we keep the home mortgage deduction. That's the kind of thing that helps support middle-class families in this country.
Jim Greenfield, how many people in this room have to file taxes and fill out tax returns? How would you like it if you didn't have to do that? Wouldn't that be cool? I know that's something extremely radical idea, right? You know, we didn't used to have an income tax in the United States. And guess what? We survived. Not only did we survive, we thrived. The income tax was created in 1913 when we passed the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. Before that, the income tax was unconstitutional. Why? Because when you have an income tax, it enables the government to collect huge amounts of revenue. Now, what was the effect of that? In 1913, we created the income tax and the Federal Reserve. Before that, the federal government was very small. Do you know how fast our economy was growing between 1870, when they started collecting records, and 1915, after the income tax and the Federal Reserve was created? You know how fast it grew? 11% per year for 45 years. That's faster than China. That's when the United States went from being a small, unimportant country to the world's dominant economic power. That's when the great American middle class was created, which provided a level of wealth and prosperity and material comfort that was unheard of in previous history. That's when Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, and Thomas Edison invented the light bulb and the phonograph, and the Wright brothers created flight, and Henry Ford created automobiles. Explosive economic growth because the federal government was small, and the capital was left in the private sector. And by the way, none of those guys that I just mentioned got a grant from the government. They did it in their garages, just like Steve Jobs. And aside from Al Gore's invention of the internet, I can't think of anything the government created that's been of any use.
Brad Witt. Warren Buffett told President Obama that the very wealthy need to pay as much in taxes or more than does the middle class. And I am in complete agreement, and that's precisely the kind of tax reform that our nation needs. Many of us think that the tax rates are 15, 25, and 35%. Boulder Dash. For the extreme wealthy and many of our corporations, because of credits, deductions, and exemptions, we have the second lowest tax rate for those folks in the entire world. Only Iceland has a lower tax rate. And Warren Buffett was right. We need to change that, so that the middle class is not subsidizing the rich 45% of American families who pay zero federal income tax. To the specific question about home mortgage deductions, you know, it was the home mortgage deduction that helped make the middle class great in America following the post-war period. It was an attempt to get Americans, the middle class, into a home. The first home. We're not talking about the second home or the third home or ad infinitum. It's inappropriate to be getting those kinds of deductions for second and third homes. Additionally, I would end the Bush tax cuts immediately and invest that money in our critical nation's infrastructure, such as energy, transportation, communication, and our public buildings. Invest that money now so that by the end of the decade, our nation has the most modern, the most up-to-date, and the most competitive national infrastructure of any nation on this earth.
We're going to change the format just a little. The next set of questions is directed to individual candidates. Mr. Avakian, what is your position on initiative petition number 21 as proposed by the...
Yes. I think we can dramatically cut military budgets by hundreds of billions of dollars, and the way we do it is stop fighting stupid wars. And I know you think, oh, I'm a Republican, I'm probably totally pro-military. In 2002, I was hosting a radio show in Portland, and I was on the air every day arguing against invading Iraq. And I have a pretty conservative audience, so you know, a lot of people would call up and argue with me and get mad at me. But it didn't make any sense to me to invade Iraq. They had nothing to do with September 11th. It wasn't being ruled by an Islamic extremist regime. It was a dictator. It wasn't bothering us. I didn't get it. And, you know, what have we spent? More than $1 trillion since then? Thousands of young Americans have died. For what? So that we can try to rebuild some other country that doesn't really want us there? I don't understand that. Afghanistan. We needed to go into Afghanistan after September 11th. Obviously, they attacked us. We needed to go in. But what are we still doing there 10 years later? World War II, it only took us 4 years to beat the Nazis. 10 years, we still haven't beaten the Taliban? I mean, come on. So, you know, before you get worried and think I'm a dove, I want to explain that I do think we need to fight against Islamic extremism. And we do need to fight against the terrorist organizations because they do want to attack us. And they want to get nuclear weapons so they can attack us and hurt us bad. So we need to infiltrate those organizations, use covert operations, special forces, kind of like the way we got bin Laden. Yes, I'll give President Obama credit for that also. We need to infiltrate those organizations and destroy them, but we don't need to spend trillions of dollars occupying foreign countries with hundreds of thousands of troops. And we can win the war against Islamic extremist terrorism much more quickly and much less costly manner if we do it the way I'm suggesting. I missed the applause.
Sorry.
Everybody looks at you blankly and think, oh, I guess they didn't like my answer.
Mr. Witt, will you
Jim Greenfield, first responding to what Dominic said about the Bush tax cuts. I'm sure you all realize that any one of you who pays taxes benefited from the Bush tax cuts, right? You all know that. I mean, you don't think it was just for the rich. Everybody's taxes were lowered. All federal income taxes were lowered. And in fact, the biggest cuts in federal income taxes were at the lowest end. They were lowered from 15 down to 10%. So if you're in favor of the Bush tax cuts, eliminate them. Understand you're going to be raising your own taxes. Free trade. Yeah, last time we tried what Brad Avakian said, that happened in 1930. That's why the Great Depression lasted 12 years, because it triggered a trade war. So eliminating free trade is not going to solve our problem. If you want to create jobs here and keep businesses from outsourcing overseas, you have to ask yourself a question. Why do they do that? Why do businesses, you can't force them to hire people here. You can't say, oh, you guys hire here, we're going to put you in jail. No, you have to give them incentives to hire here. You have to make them want to hire here. And why should they hire here if they can get a much better deal in some other country where the taxes are lower? Do you know American companies have $1.5 trillion in overseas profits that they will not bring back to the United States, because if they do, they will be taxed again. And the United States has the highest corporate tax rate in the industrial world. It's 35%. Now, if you want them to bring jobs back here, they have to be able to make money. They have to be able to make money. And if they can make more money by giving people jobs in Indonesia or China, hello, that's where they're going to go. How are they going to make money here? You have to have a pro-business policy, a climate that enables them to make profits by lowering their tax rates, lowering the regulations. And I don't know why you want to tax corporations at all. Those are the institutions in our society that create the jobs, create the prosperity, create the wealth. And I know that a lot of lefties hate corporations. And I say, well, where'd you buy those clothes you're wearing? What about that car you're driving? What about the cell phone you use? What about the home you live in? What do you think created all that stuff? It's the corporations you hate so much.